What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. My name is Sean Sheehan, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the God Almighty himself, Bryan Lacey, as we look ahead to Oktagon.
Bless you, my child. Bless you, my child. There we go. How are you, buddy?
Not too bad. We're doing this so long now, we're getting in jokes in our, in our previews.
Good. I love it.
How have you been since the last time we talked? Obviously, we spoke before Oktagon 62, which went down on the 12th of October. So, Jesus, 2.5 weeks ago now that we're speaking. It doesn't feel that long.
It's crazy, right?
Tell us about that show, because watching it at home here, I was actually, for the start of the card, it was my sister's birthday that night, and we were out, and I was watching the Will Fleury fight on my phone, and I got home, and to see it in the big screen, to see the majesty of the size of the crowd and everything, and then there was a UFC fucking warehouse event afterwards, and it was just, it did blow your mind to see how can more people be interested than that, you know, in the middle of it. It was absolutely crazy. What was it like for you to be there, obviously commentating? And it must have been like, people talk about career highlights, that has to be up there, is it?
It is the highlight so far, without a doubt. It was start to finish the whole weekend. You know, being there fight week as well with the fighters, the whole energy was different. Everybody was excited because no matter what happened, it was going to be huge. Like the amount of people just couldn't comprehend. The buzz in Frankfurt as well, it was everywhere. You know, when we go to cities, this sport is still growing, even in, you know, places that have a lot of it or have stars. But Germany has kind of blossomed over the last couple of years. And to see Frankfurt buzzing with the event, like people talking about it, like you go to different restaurants and the whole thing felt special, and it delivered on the day as well. I walked to, it was quite funny actually, because we stayed in a hotel which was on the airport, so it was like the closest one to get to the venue, but it's one road to the actual venue. So it's, and again, 60,000 people making their way there. So it's supposed to be a 10-minute journey, and I set off an hour and a half, maybe just close to 2 hours before, and you just sat in traffic. And in the end, it was like, we're going to walk this. So even that bit, you know, walking with the people into the stadium, watching it fill up, and then seeing the fights deliver as well. Those moments, that the Eklund and the Jungwirth walkouts was something special. Koga debuting for Oktagon was huge. The knockout with Fleury had everybody on their feet. Champions changing hands, you know, from the Lister to with Mallory Martin and Engazek taking the belt off Kinsler the way he did. Everything was special. And I knew it was special because usually you watch the arena empty and then you disappear back to your hotel, or you go grab a beer or whatever else. But all the Oktagon staff stayed, and we watched it empty, and everybody kind of had this moment in the cage or around the cage where we kind of didn't want to leave this holy ground. Something special had happened that day. And like you said, career highlight. It's going to be very, very hard to top that as far as, you know, a personal experience for sure.
Is there anything different for you? Because the fights are on, the fights are the same. You know, the commentary's there, the commentary's the same. But like, I don't know, when they're watching it at home, it's just so expansive. It looks so big. I spoke about it on the podcast after, and I said, you kind of understand why the UFC don't do it, because what they want to give you is a homogenized product that looks the same every week. And obviously Oktagon and other people don't want to do that, so it's better for them. But for you as a commentator sitting there, is it more like maybe a twinge of nerves, or like a, what am I doing here? What's going on type of thing? Or is there anything like factually that anyone would have a challenge being in an arena versus in a massive stadium like that?
So it's a weird thing. It's kind of like when I did comedy, when you're doing a small pub in, you know, the north of England, or you're doing like a theatre or a small arena or something like that. You once you get into the rhythm, you're in the rhythm. So that it kind of feels the same. But what you actually get are moments where you suddenly realize, and you're woken up to the size of it. So whether it's the pop from the crowd, or whether it's a walkout, or even just, you know, with the halftime show and seeing people and all that type of thing, that was kind of the difference. The rhythm of the fights felt the same, and once you're in there, you're calling it, and you're excited with whatever happens, because that's out of your control. You're just kind of in the moment, dealing with the emotions and trying to, you know, verbalize it and communicate that as best you can. But some of the moments, like the pop for when Koga knocked out Rakic, that, like, you felt it. It felt like a boom, like a wall behind you. The noise, even with the headphones on and Luke Barnett shouting in my ear, it was it physically kind of, you see the scale of it. So there were moments where I was like awake and sort of realizing what it was, but just being in it and feeling the energy of the fights that close is yeah, it was great. It was great. I'm making it sound like I just, did the job, but I was very aware of the size of it. I'll tell you that.
100%. Before we move on, you've mentioned some of the big moments. Koga's standout, obviously, for me. You could kind of feel that as well, kind of watching it home and even watching back, the finish, the way the crowd erupted. But like Ingaze getting the job done, as we spoke about in the preview, Kinsel, always a tough guy to beat, and a guy who's obviously been a stop point for Oktagon over the last while in the main event as well. But what about Will Fleury? You have to mention Will, obviously a friend of the show and everything like that. He's put himself right in line now. And I was it this card he wanted to fight on, or the next card? We might see him before the end of the year. Yeah,
dude. So again, I've got such a soft spot for Will. Like, he is such a great personality, and we talked about it before in the last one. He is the perfect fit for Oktagon. What he brings, he can fucking fight. The personality, the story, the promotion he does, everything that comes with him makes him the perfect fit. And sometimes you see people like that, but they don't deliver in the cage. And he was under the most pressure against the number one ranked light heavyweight, former interim champion, Pavel Langer, one of these people that lots of underestimated. Rafael Javier lost to him. You've got Popek, who lost to him. And again, these are what I would consider, top echelon light heavyweights in Europe and beyond. So there's a lot of pressure on Will, but watching how he handled it and like make that moment, and then it was as soon as he knocked out Langer, and what a knockout was, because even the picture where Langer's coming down face first and Will stood over him is epic. But he switched straight to what is next. And again, sometimes you lose that with fighters. And Carlos Vermola was doing like they've kind of got this commentary thing going where Carlos has guest commentators, because he's huge. He's a megastar in the Czech Republic and Slovakia. So and he was there cage side, and Will just straight at him. And it was so funny to see Carlos's reaction, because usually he gets up, gets in the cage, but he didn't. So that got me thinking about, and I'll never say this because I know Carlos has accepted some crazy fights, and he would never, he's more than a company man. He's his own man, but he's a fighter. He's a true fighter. But I just thought that was, maybe he looked at what Will delivered there, plus what he'd done previously against Squaw, his training partner. And I wouldn't be quick to get off my seat and say, yeah, come on then, let's go. Because I think Will Fleury is in the right place as far as promotion wise, and I think he is in the form of his life. I think he is motivated by time disappearing in his career. And I think that he wants that belt, whoever has it, as soon as possible. And I think he can get it. And I think it's going to be very hard getting it off him when he does get it.
100%. And Will has been non-stop playing into what you just said there over the last week or so. And that's what Oktagon want. That's what MMA fans want, and we want to see people calling people out. And he's not afraid, and he maybe he thinks he's a possible opponent is, but he's not either. Let's be honest. And that's a fight. God, I hope that fight does end up happening, because it feels like Will as well. He's just improved slowly throughout his career, and like this opportunity's been coming, hasn't it?
So, again, you look at it as a knockout and you take that moment, but watch, and it's, I don't know how long it is, 2 minutes or something like that it took him to get that knockout. But you watch how dialed in he is. You watch the technique in his striking. You look at the range and especially the shot before it, the jab before it, he is right on the point of the glove. Like, it is and against an awkward guy who's got a weird stance and a weird way of moving, he dialed in so well. So for me, you look at the mustache and the mouth and how he talks and all that stuff, and you will be stupidly deceived to think that he is just a brawler stepping in there. I think even with the Squaw fight, he knocked Squaw down, a glory kickboxer. He got the finish with a broken thumb. He is, like I said, I think he's in the prime, and that's a scary thought for whether. And he's talking about going middleweight. He made the weight cut, and he's like, I reckon I could get some more kilos off here. And I was like, whether it's middleweight or light heavyweight, I think he has got a legitimate chance of fighting for gold very, very soon.
100%. And you just know as well. Let's say if he was to win the light heavyweight belt, Will would be would only love to have two belts, one in each shoulder. So we could talk for an hour about Will and about that card, but we better look ahead to this upcoming weekend. As smooth and as brilliant as that last event went, this one is a little bit different, isn't it? There's been a lot of...
Oh my God. Do you know, I had to... it's going to be a moment in my head as far as what this card has been, because I had to check what the main event was, because it's changed so much. So we were supposed to have Pirat and Vimola. Then there was talks of it being Ravizhiniak and Mazouk, and then they were talking about bringing Carlos in against Will or somebody else. And you know, even shifting underneath, you've lost the other title fight. You lost Sam Creasy, who was supposed to fight Beno Adamia. There's been so many shifting sands with this card. I know the matchmaker very well, and personally, I know he's not slept for that last event almost broke him just getting it ready, and the fact it went smoothly, you know, all praise for that. But this one is very unique. But I think where we're at now, actually, some of the matches that have switched. So the Pukac match that is now, we'll see him face off against Amari Diedrich. I think that's a better fight. I think it's a better fight for the promotion. I think it's a better fight for both fighters. Stylistically, I think that's more exciting than both the fights that they had previously lined up. So I think it's kind of fallen slowly and dramatically, but I think it's landed in a place which has given us a really, really good card for Bratislava.
100%. And I think what we have here as well is a lot of fights that could be either a number one contender fight or, you know, maybe a fight before a number one contender fight sort of thing, because there's a lot of talent on this, and some of the younger guys as well maybe getting their opportunity, or some of the newer guys like the Zalas and obviously in the co-main event getting the opportunity here. And I think if you Scott Langdon sent me the card yesterday, and I had glanced at it before. I was, or not the day before yesterday, sorry. I glanced at it before that, but I hadn't done my started my research yet that I did yesterday. And when he sent me this card, I was like, oh, that's a pretty good card. But then you look at what came before, you're like, oh shit. So if you haven't seen the card before, just forget that, because we actually we actually have a pretty good card here. The main event now is Ivan Bushinger against Hafini Nafuka, which is a very, very intriguing fight. People know if they've listened to this show, I'm a big fan of Nafuka, the way he fights. I'm just intrigued by him as a character and as a fighter. And obviously he went in there against Predrag Bogdanovic and lost earlier on in the year, but he's had 2 wins since that. And I actually went back and I watched that fight last night. And you know what? That was a lot more of a competitive fight maybe than people remember. Like it was... You know, if you zagged a different way, he could have won that fight, you know, and he had some really good positions, and I thought his striking looked much improved with that fight. Yeah. But having said that, right, Nafuka is only 7-1 now in his career. That fight was 3 fights ago. He's a young guy, I believe. I was listening, funny enough, I was listening to a soccer podcast earlier on. They were talking about, like, having a defeat when you were young and how it helps you to further your career. I feel like Nafuka is one of those guys that will look back in a few years and he will look at that Bogdanovic loss and he will think, God almighty, that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Because since then, obviously, he's gone again to another level. But even in that fight, he looked like he had gone to another level. Now he's in a main event against Bushinger, again, a guy who's been around for a long time. We'll talk about Bushinger in a second. But first of all, on Nafuka, it must be a joy to commentate on a guy like this who's an up-and-comer who you could just see in 10 fights' time being a really, really top fighter. But this is a big opportunity for him in the main event here, Brian.
It's huge, and let's not forget, he did fight on that Germany Stadium card. He beat Arian Topalaya, which was who was undefeated before that, murking everybody. 7 wins, 7 first-round finishes, and he handled him. It wasn't the most exciting fight of the night, but he dominated him. And again, when you talk about that Bogdanovic fight, look at some of those grappling exchanges. It's exactly like you said, one slight positional change, and he's on top in that fight. From that fight as well, things people don't know about Nafuka. First of all, he's got this crazy backstory. So he's called the Namibian Nightmare. His parents brought him over to Germany, trying to better his life. Then they had to go back to Namibia, and it was so bad that they sold everything and basically came as refugees. So they basically came in the worst state possible, worse than their first trip to Germany. And they gave everything to give him the life. You know, I mean, this is a kid that was you know, had less than nothing. It was, and I'm not just talking about physical stuff, but like as a chance in life to make him anything. There's, you know, no opportunities. There's a lot of discrimination about these camps that they were staying in, and his mum and dad worked multiple jobs, got themselves on their feet, and got him into jiu-jitsu. And again, that's his base. And what is fantastic and almost ridiculous to understand is this kid is 20. He's 20 years old. This will be his 12th pro fight coming up. His whole fight camps up until the Bogdanovich fight were with a jiu-jitsu gym, like not a mixed martial arts gym. And it's a strange team as well. They were, he's a young kid. So he from, you know, 17, 18, 19, 20, they didn't realize that they're supposed to be with him on the weight cut or the weigh-in. So he went on his own to fight weekends. So this is a kid with surrounded by professionals, with teams like UFD Gym, with teams like Spitfire Gym, with teams like, you know, MMA Spirit, with all the facilities, all the knowledge. And he got this far up to the Bogdanovich fight with a team that, you know, really didn't understand the full scope of mixed martial arts. Crazy. Now he's with Reza Madadi at Alicante. So he's training under him. And I saw Reza with him. And what he needs is that, you know, the experience, but the, you know, the strict father type figure. I'm not saying that he is his father, but, you know, that somebody that can guide him, help him make decisions and push him, because with youth and with all the trappings of getting this, you know, spotlight now, it's very easy to sort of get swayed by it. But I thought, you know, seeing that Ryan Topalaya fight, I saw maturity in his performance. I saw improvements in his striking for sure, and his grappling is undeniable. That is his base. He is one of the most athletic human beings I've ever met. So a lot has happened to this kid in 20 years of his life, and to say he's now at the top of the card, he's facing off against Buchinger, who was 18 years old, already a pro fighter, I think, before Nafuka was born. That is, you know, it's a dream matchup for him. You know, he definitely respects Ivan Buchinger, and he will be staring across the cage in the main event in Bratislava against him when it comes around.
It's such an interesting story, but like, you only have to look at him fight to understand why people are so out to him. I didn't realize that about the gym, and God Almighty, what's he going to look like in a few more fights now because of that? It's crazy. But this is no easy fight against Buchinger. Like, I'm looking at his record there. Like, you think, look, people probably remember him from the Conor McGregor fight from years and years and years ago, and think, oh, and I know people, you know, he went on a good run after that, but in the last, since 2018, he's won 11 fights. Like, that's a whole lot of fights. The only guys he's lost them that time are Paradise, Paranas, Keita, and Lamaliescu, who are all very, very good fighters and have, you know, championship potential and are champions. Like, he's also beaten, you know, Lucas Rosowski. He beat Paradise in there as well. He's won some big fights in that time. And going back watching that fight against Rajewski, which is his last win, which happened in July, he looked so good in that fight. It was unbelievable. Like, the shape he was in, he was going forward like that lead active hand and throwing that big overhand. And not only is he striking, which we all know about, he ended up getting, it was a ninja choke in the end, wasn't it? A finish like that. Yeah. So, you know, Nafuka's obviously very, very good on the ground, but, you know, Bushinger's no joke on the ground either. And I think the biggest issue for Nafuka, obviously, the striking isn't there yet with him. He's really, really good on the ground. If Bushinger can push that pace, which was a little bit of an issue in the Bogdanovich fight for Nafuka, and go forward, he can land big shots, and he can put him in trouble here. So this is not necessarily your striker versus grappler matchup. It is in a way, but both of them, I think, are so much more than that. If you were to like picture this fight, how it goes early doors, do you think it's like that? Do you think Bushinger's the one going forward, and Nafuka is obviously going to be looking for the takedown as he always does? But are we going to see a little bit of a different Bushinger, maybe where he tries to pick him off?
I think you know, it's, you look at the records as well. I think 10-1 for Nafuka, and then you've got 43-10 with 36 finishes from Buchinger. And again, you've highlighted some of the wins and the victories, and you know the form he's in now. But he also fought through M1 against the monster German fighters and the Dagestani fighters, the Chechen fighters, and won multiple belts, held it for a long time over there. And he, like the Rajewski fight, said to me, you know, a lot about him and his mentality, especially fighting on Slovakian soil. He he is in great form. He had the fight of his life against Vojta Barboric when he became the first ever double champion Octagon in the same arena, the Tipos Arena. And something happens with Bookinger where he wants to, defend his ground. So I think we're going to see a very aggressive Bookinger trying to put it on and intimidate Nafuka. And I think he'll want to submit him. I think, lots of people talk about submission experts, and I don't think there's many better than Ivan Bukina when you look at that record. 43 wins, 25, 26 submission finishes or something like that. All various variations on, like you said, ninja choke in his last one. But I think he is going to try and bully Nafuka. I think he's going to try and break him, because we saw at the end of the Bogdanovic fight just how emotional Nafuka got. There is still a kid in there, 100%. He's this athlete. He's a very well proven, quantity as far as in the cage. But I think mentally, Bookinger is so experienced. And we saw with that Raevski that there was no respect for Raevski in that. He walked him down, dominated him, wasn't scared of any aspect of his game, and just imposed himself. And I think we're going to see the same from him this time. It's whether Nafuka, when they go to the ground, has he got the skills to deal with what Bookinger brings?
100%. I'm really looking forward to that. Any Nafuka fight I'm looking forward to, but any Bushinger fight I'm looking forward to as well, so that should be fun.
Really, right?
The co-main event then is a very interesting fight. Like one of those fights you never would have thought of until you were handed it, and then it's pretty good. Aaron Abbey against Zhumagulov. And it's funny with Abbey. I don't know, I've obviously watched Abbey for a long time in his Cage Warriors career and everything like that. But watching back his fights, he's a way more heavy wrestler than I think I've given him credit for, to be honest. Because like you look at him, first of all, he hops into strikes and then he throws some nice stiff kicks and those kind of jabs and shots inside. But I think because like I don't think he cuts a whole lot of weight, and maybe that makes him a little bit smaller as well for the division. I think he uses that, and I heard someone saying recently, we often talk about a size advantage, not a size disadvantage. And, being smaller sometimes can be an advantage. And his wrestling is so good, the way he gets on top, but he's so heavy on top as well. It's so good. And Ninja Magulov obviously coming over, having a long stretch in the UFC. Watching back some of his fights, again, we talk about Zig when you should have zagged. There's so many of his fights that were so close. He tends to go to a lot of decisions, and he's this very kind of metronomical, leans left and throws right, leans right and throws left type of fighter, but very good and very effective. He's one of those guys, if he had a tad more power, he'd be such a hard guy to fight, but he can wrestle and he can fight all around as well. I think he's the type of guy who will come in here and be looking to become the champion, be looking to hold on to the belt for a long while, make a bit of money, and put a real stamp on his career. Because I feel like at the start of the UFC run, everyone thought, oh, maybe he could become a guy who gets to the rankings, to the top 5, maybe even championship level, and it didn't work out for him for whatever reason. But I feel like Octagon is a place where he'll get constant fights, he'll get opportunities like this, but he'll also get tests. But we've seen before with Aaron Abbey, you can give him tests and he can get through them. It's a very, very intriguing fight. As I said, one of those fights we weren't expecting, but on paper it looks very good.
It's a beautiful bit of matchmaking, a very tough test for Aaron Abbey. Like you look at the caliber of fighters that his opponents fought, and those fights in the UFC, I think, I'm just looking at it now, there's three of the last 4 losses which were in the UFC, there were split decisions, and I watched back some of those, and I gave him the other way. Like, I mean, I think you are somebody that was got a better eye than most people for that type of thing. But like you said, it was so close, some of those fights, that I think, coming out of the UFC for anybody is difficult. He's won 2 since then. He's got personality again, which is very unique coming from Kazakhstan. I've spent a fair bit of time over there, and he is, he's got a great personality. He can fight, and he will be a tough test for Aaron Abbey. But the thing you talked about with Abbey as far as his wrestling and his style now, when I first met Aaron, and again, via the condition he's got, cystic fibrosis, the condition he lives with, he couldn't cut weight. So he would be like in the morning of the weigh-ins, and we're talking about weighing in at 125, he would be eating breakfast and basically putting stuff in his pockets so that he was close to 125 or on 125 for that. Since then, he's as he's grown and as he's become a man, he's developed his body a lot muscularly, and now he cuts a little bit of weight. Still not crazy amount of weight, but it's a little bit, which I think has definitely played into his fight style. So his wrestling is there, but he's also now, he doesn't take that much out of his body that he's depleted. So his cardio, his pace for 3 rounds, and you've seen it with some tough fights that he's had across the board in various promotions, is phenomenal. And I think that's where his keys to victory lie. I think staying out of trouble, because Zhulagov has got a lot of knockouts. He can hit, he's hard, he's definitely, got to be respected in every single area. But I think Aaron and the pace he can bring and the control he can impose with his grappling, working with Steve Nightingale up at the Northwest Fight Academy, I think, this is the test for Aaron. This division is very thin at the minute because it's brand new. You've got, Sam Creasy at the top of it, who's claimed the belt, the first ever UK fighter to hold an Oktagon belt. So the path back to that shot isn't a long shot. Zhulagov will think if he wins this, he should be rightfully fighting whether the winner of Beno Ademir or hopscotching him to fight Sam Creasy. But I think Aaron Abbey, and from what I know, because usually we speak, on the run up to fights a couple of times a week, or on the run up, it's been so quiet, and I just know that's because his head is down and he knows how tough this test is. So I'm excited for this. I think it's a big test for Aaron Abbey. I think it's a perfect debut spot for introducing Zhulagov to Oktagon fans in Slovakia, one of its home countries, and the next shot should be the winner of this, I think.
100%. Let's touch on a few of the other fights because time is coming against us here. You mentioned Robert Puchak against Amari Diedrich earlier on, and watching the two of these guys, this has barn burner written all over it. Scott was telling me Diedrich, he's a former Glory kickboxer, is that correct? And he has some
100%,
big finishes. I think the takedown defense is improving again. He's training out of Renegade, if I'm not mistaken, and his issues on the ground, obviously, as you're going to have, but the more and more he fights, they'll get better. Puchak reminds me, he's like an orthodox Darren Till a little bit. He's the neck tattoos, and he's the kind of that Muay Thai stance, throws that hard leg kicks, choppy striking, good defensively as well. He's a guy, looking at his record, it's not the best record in the world, but a lot of the fights in there, lost a lot of decisions and close enough fights as well. He's one of those guys that's, I'm looking at his record here, 17 of his fights have gone to a decision. He makes it tough, and especially for a guy like Diedrich, who's still very young in his career, obviously transitioning over from the kickboxing. He only debuted in 2021 and only made, I suppose his big promotional debut a year later, and then obviously for Oktagon for the last 2 fights. It's a big test for him, and I know sometimes you look at a record and you think maybe that's that's going to be a walkover, but I think it's far from it here, and a good test at this stage of his career. And a lot of people are talking about him kind of going to that next level and maybe being one of the top stars for Oktagon.
Yeah, so Amari Diedrich is, he reached the top of kickboxing, and again, I always find it's fascinating when kickboxers or people from different disciplines like Muay Thai or boxing move into mixed martial arts, because you like the drop in where you stand as far as the alpha is so dramatic. Like when you go as a kickboxer, go to an MMA gym, they love it. They'll take you down, they'll control you, they'll gas you out. It's such a it's a hard transition. Amari though is like a pure athlete, and he's got one of the craziest physiques you've ever seen. His mentality is so so strong, and such a big part of the way he fights. Like, he's so imposing in the cage. And then look at, he fights at a 4th dimension in Nottingham, which is primarily was primarily a Muay Thai gym. Then you got fighters like Teddy Stringer coming out of there. You've got Amari, you got Vicenik goes up there and spars as well. But for me, seeing that Amari now trains with Renegade and knowing what the rounds are like there, and knowing that he's getting the work he needs, which again, he fought Mate Kurtesh on his debut for Oktagon, who's fought for the title 2 times, I think. He's fought the best of the best. He's everywhere he's good. He is so good everywhere. And, he trains out at AK as well with Islam Makhachev, with Habib Nurmagomedov, those guys. And his wrestling has come on so much since he's made those trips to America. And that's what he used to control Amari. Like, he recognized the danger. And from that, I know Amari's been putting in the work. So I think we're going to see a much more well-rounded Amari Diedrich. Robert Puchak is a mega star over there. Like, he's called the king, the Prince of Bratislava. That's his nickname. So for this, on this card, and he's in fun fights. There's decisions, and again, when you look at that, you'll think, oh, maybe a boring fighter. There's nothing boring about the way he fights. He comes to fight. He wants to engage. He'll grapple. He'll strike. And I think, it's the obvious game plan for him. Can he close the distance? Can he get it to the mat? We've seen him fight people like Miroslav Brosh, which he lost, but in the third round, when he used that grappling, that's when he got control. And if he'd fought like that from the start, I think he would have walked away with the victory. So his game is going to be to try and close the distance with Amari. But we saw with Amari in his last fight against Hromek in Birmingham, once he decides, to impose himself, it's so hard to get away from him. He cuts the cage off so well. He's devastating with his strikes. He's not greedy with his setups, but once he's got you hurt, he will finish you. So this for me is a beautiful bit of matchmaking, especially since they both lost opponents. Now they've both come together, and I think this is the one I got my eye on for fight of the night for sure.
Very interesting. You mentioned Mario Curtis. Well, he's also on this card. He's fighting Leandro Silva, and it's funny watching Curtis. You could nearly tell that he where he trains. He's very, very strong on the ground. And the thing about him as well, I watched back the Diedrich fight. The cardio is so good, and he can just keep going non-stop. When he gets back to the feet, he is well able to strike just as well as he did early doors, even though he's 2.5 rounds. He's fighting Silva, who's a southpaw. Not a whole lot of movement. It's funny enough, it's a similar enough matchup that Pukac is for Diedrich, I think. In this one, he kind of stands in the middle and he throws kind of those big shots, and a difficult guy to figure out, I think. So that's an interesting one. One fight I definitely want to touch on, Radic Rusal against Jack Maguire. Obviously, fighting out of Ireland. This was only announced hours ago, nearly at this stage when we were recording. And Jack Maguire is one of those guys. He's a bit of an enigma in Irish MMA, because he made his debut against Manny Akpan, which is one of the toughest debuts you could get back in 2019. He beat Kieran Mulholland in his next fight, and then we didn't see him for 4 years. He wasn't no fights for 4 years. Came back and he won one in March of this year, and now he's in Oktagon. But I'll just name some of the guys he's beaten as an amateur, right? Alexander O'Sullivan, who you see doing really good things in Cage Warriors, as we have with Leon Hill. He's been in there with Nathan Kelly. He lost that fight, but he beat Kieran Clark as well as an amateur. A whole lot of amateur fights. I was at some of them, and he always impressed. Obviously training with his brother, and he trains a lot of people I know as well down in Cork. His opponent here, I watched a few of his fights, and he's a talented guy as well. He's like a Terminator. He stalks you and lands that big right, and he's very, very dangerous, and you have to be very smart to beat him. And you know what? Watching him, you think this is a tough opponent, is Rusal, for a guy who hasn't fought that much. I think you need to be in fight shape, but in fight IQ shape, if that kind of makes sense as well, to beat a guy like that. So it's a very tough fight for Maguire. But again, they could have an Irish star here, because look what he did as an amateur. If he can get going, I think 3 or 4 fights we'll really see where Jack Maguire is over the next while. I know you're probably watching him maybe for the first time over the last week or so. What do you think of Jack? And this is an interesting matchup and a tough matchup for his debut in Oktagon.
Yeah, I think you've said it exactly right. It's not just like physically what he's going to bring, because you know what that camp brings down in Cork. You know how ready they come, and he's already beaten a lot of good guys. But it's how he's going to deal mentally with Rochelle, because Rochelle is intimidating. He does these crazy walkouts, coming out in like a Hannibal Lecter style thing. And from the weigh-ins, he gets in your face. Like, it's renowned. It's going to happen. So for me, it's how he deals with that moment. It's how he's going to deal with the size of the crowd, the stadium. We've talked about fighters that stepped in and have openly talked about it, like Callum. I've forgotten his surname. Why have I forgotten that? There we go. But the
Parker?
Fight.
Well,
Callum Parker fought him. That was a great fight. And Callum Parker's as game as they come. What a kid. But there's this thing of dealing with understanding the size of Oktagon shows, because it will be full from the start. This is going to be, packed. He's going to be early in the card. He's going to be walking out to a full arena. So it's how he deals with that. But like you said, I think somebody like Jack can very quickly make a name for himself here. And against Rochelle, it's a hell of a fight. It will have eyes on it from the start. So it's a tough test, but I don't think there's any better way to make your mark in Oktagon than stepping in against somebody like Rochelle, where you're not just going to get the fight, but you're going to get the media, you're going to get the spotlight, you're going to get the dramatic weigh-ins, all that stuff. So I'm excited for Jack. I really am excited to see how he copes with it all. And another Irish flag in the cage is always a good thing. exciting, right?
100%. Run us through some of the other fights left on the card, because there's some fun ones coming up. There's a former Octagon Challenges winner on this, Karl Rosavi. He's fighting, I'll butcher this name, but Jaini Paljak, is that it? And I was talking to a couple of people, and there's a lot of talk about him around, but tell us about that fight, and maybe Veronica Smolkova as well. She's fighting Dos Santos, coming here, watching bits and pieces of her. Again, someone who's maybe had a tough start to her career, but has a lot of talent. There's a lot of fun fights aside from the ones we talked. Give us a quick rundown of those ones left over.
Yeah, so the Palakai versus Rishavi one's huge. Rishavi, big star, won Octagon Challenge Season 2, comes from, again, this crazy story of, turning his life around from footballer to football hooligan to, heavy drinker to now superstar in Octagon. Palakai, best friends with Max Holzer. One of the rising stars. He's got a win over Dulatov, I think the only person to beat Islam Dulatov as well. So he has looked great. And I say great, like he's beaten the likes of Pokorny, people like that, but he hasn't been finishing people. Rishavi is a finisher, and he brings extreme power, and it's going to be a tough test for Palakai for sure, and especially coming into enemy territory. Veronika Smolkova, the sweetheart of Slovakia, comes from Muay Thai, comes from this Dracula gym, has been fun. And again, she's just so like, if you met her, you'd think the only thing she'd be into is doing her hair or makeup or the latest dresses or anything. And then she puts the gum shield in and she goes to war. I've called her fights over in America. She had 2 of the fights over there as well. And they were bloodbaths, like apps. And she loved every second of them. So she's like a rising star. She could be a big star for Octagon, but it's a tough test against Dos Santos because Dos Santos has already beaten another star, Magda. I've forgotten her name. Come on, brain kicking. But she beat another star in Octagon from Reinders MMA, and she's a grappler. And this lady out grappled her, submitted her on the ground. So Smolkova's whole game has got to be trying to keep it to the feet. If she can get a win, she will be crying, and the audience will be going absolutely nuts. But I think it's a real tough test to see how she's moved on in mixed martial arts. One final one I just want to mention, and I think everybody should watch, is Piotr Wawrzyniak, the Polish fighter, taking on Marek Mazuk. Mazuk is a farmer from Slovakia, and he hits like a truck. He has got ridiculous knockouts on his record. Last fight, he beat David Zavada in a 1 minute 15 almost murder by the way he went through him, and didn't respect the experience that was in front of him. Very unique energy, and then you got Wawrzyniak, very Polish style fighter, former Babylon champion, former title challenger, almost beat Kinsel, was winning the first 2 rounds before he got choked in the third against Patrick Kinsel, and that's going to be an absolute banger as well. So there's plenty for people, whether you like hard hitters, jiu-jitsu, whether you like rising stars or crazy stories, there's plenty for people to enjoy on Octagon 63, mate.
I believe there's another fight as well that is by the time this comes out, it'll probably be announced, but maybe we shouldn't mention it just in case it doesn't happen. But maybe the French fans might be enjoying it.
It's out. Lapillus. It's out. Okay. There you go. Look at you. You are on it, my friend. You get the info before me, but Lapillus is now on the card.
That's an interesting fight as well. I watched a bit of his opponent, Francesc Fodor. He's an odd fighter, low hands, and you know what? He's so odd that a lot of his fights lead to a lot of clinches because people don't know how to deal with him, and they're just like, I'm going to clinch this guy. And look at Lapillus, we know the way he moves. Yeah, that's a very interesting fight too, isn't it? And I know Lapillus, he comes in. Himself, obviously, we know the Lapillus, let's put it that way, they're very good, very technical fighters, and Damien has been around for a very, very long time. That's competitive fight as well, isn't it? And that's probably title implications down the line if it goes right for either of them. I think both talented guys.
Yes, it's a great one. Again, Fodor is the best friend of Robert Pukac. They usually don't fight on the same card, which is interesting because they corner and train each other. So this is going to be interesting to see how that works as a dynamic for them being on the same card. But he is, again, his record isn't fantastic, but he has captured the hearts of fans. Again, he was on Octagon Challenge, I think season 1. Good personality, very weird fighting style, but that also brings some great finishes and great moments. And Lapillus, just heaps of experience. Has fought around the world, has claimed belts in various promotions, hasn't had the greatest run in recent years, but you think about his experience, his style, and the skills he's got. And like you said, even the Lapalus family and where they're at right now, never to be underestimated. So there's plenty of these fights as we go through them that could sneak in that fight of the night bonus. So yeah, another exciting one.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Bryan, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Check out Oktagon this weekend. Always fun fights there, and something a little bit different. In a world that's very homogenized, Oktagon do some very, very good stuff. So give it a try and let us know what you think. Okay, that's it from us. We'll see you next time. Good luck.